all four horsemen of the apocalypse, they are galloping right now on the planet.
There is no other alternative. We all need to be strong in our belief in the possibility of peace. The parties have agreed here today that all of the final status issues, all of the core issues, and all other issues are all on the table for negotiation. And they are on the table with one simple goal: a view to ending the conflict, ending the claims. Our objective will be to achieve a final status agreement over the course of the next 9 months.
An overview of the end-time prophetic wars in what I think is their logical order. The first, the war of Israeli extermination, described in Psalm 83. Psalm 83 states that the immediate neighbors of Israel will launch a war for the purpose of wiping out Israel as a nation. The nations described as being a part of this nefarious effort are those with a common border with Israel, including Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and Gaza. All of these with a common border. The second half of Psalm 83 is a prayer for Israel's victory. The outcome of the war is not specifically stated in Psalm 83, but we know from other scriptures that Israel will be victorious. For example, Zechariah 12:6 says that in the end times Israel will be like a fire pot among pieces of wood and a flaming torch among sheaves, so that they will consume on the right hand and on the left all the surrounding peoples. They're going to be like David against Goliath. Bill Salus believes this war of annihilation will boomerang on the Arab nations and will result in their overwhelming defeat, producing great territorial expansion, enhanced national resources for Israel, and yes, peace for Israel. Incidentally, it's during this war that Israel will most likely destroy Damascus, in fulfillment of the prophecies in Isaiah 17 and Jeremiah 19, which says that in the end times Damascus will be destroyed and it will never be built again. But the security provided by Psalm 83 war will not last long, Because what will happen is that the Arab nations will turn to their natural ally, Russia, and cry out for help, resulting in the first war of Gog and Magog, the war described in Ezekiel 38:9. This is where Russia comes down against Israel with certain specified Muslim allies. The Russians will be delighted to respond to the Arab cry for help because they have always dreamed of taking over the oil fields of the Middle East. They will therefore launch an invasion for the stated purpose of helping the Muslims destroy Israel. Their specific allies will involve the outer ring of Muslim states that surround Israel, all but Saudi Arabia. Now, I believe that the unstated agenda of the Russians and their real motivation will be to use the Arab invitation as an excuse to expand their sovereignty over all the Middle East. This ulterior motive is described in Ezekiel 38:12, where it says the Russians will come to capture spoil and to seize plunder. The invading armies will be supernaturally destroyed by God on the mountains of Israel. The Lord will accomplish this destruction through earthquakes and pestilence, hail, fire, and brimstone, and battlefield confusion. Even the Jewish people will recognize that the victory belongs to God, and it will open many of their hearts to the Lord.
One day, like me. I'm not supposed to have. And I will never compromise on the security of Israel and its citizens and on the vital interests that protect our future. I think you know, John, more than most, how important it is to ensure the security of Israel. And I hope that despite the shifting sands in the Middle East, together we can build a rock-solid foundation for security and for a secure peace. That's the job we're going to do in the coming days and weeks. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, David.
I think it's safe to say that we know what the issues are. We know the parameters and the possibilities of peace. And as I said not so many months ago at Ben Gurion Airport as I left, the time is soon arriving where leaders are going to have to make difficult decisions.
That we here highly resolve these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom.
This nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom.
That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom.
That the nation shall have a new birth of freedom.
Discussing America's security challenges and a solution for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Connor Powell live in Jerusalem with the latest. Hi, Connor.
Hi, Arthur. Well, Secretary of State John Kerry spent the last 9 months shuttling between Washington and Jerusalem trying to craft an agreement between the Israelis and Palestinians. And despite the lack of sort of tangible progress so far in crafting that deal, Kerry said today he is optimistic a deal can be reached, at least a framework agreement can be reached by the end of April. Both Israeli and Palestinian publics have overwhelmingly supported a peace agreement according to polls taken in recent weeks and months. What happens happens in the next couple weeks will really dictate what happens for the long-term peace agreement going forward, Arthel.
Some serious tug of war to come.
To your health tonight, the next time you visit Roper St. Francis, instead of sticking out your tongue and saying, ah, you might hold out your hand as a wave of infrared light tells the Roper staff member who you are. It's called palm scanning technology. And Roper St. Francis says it not only gets through to your appointment on time, it protects your identity along the way.
And then right back down.
It may look like something out of science fiction.
Just basically a small scanner that allows us to take a picture of the vein pattern in your hand. Our palm scanners are the new patient identification system that we're using throughout all of Roper St. Francis healthcare system to make sure we accurately identify the patient each and every time they come in and present for a visit.
And Roper St. Francis says palm scanning is one way to access your unique electronic health record, to review your history and document your care each visit.
When it comes to financial transactions, signatures can of course be forged, and PIN codes and passwords can be cracked. But I'm about to authorise a credit card payment using one of the most secure methods around. It's a system called Pulse Wallet. It has an infrared camera in there which scans the vein pattern in my hand. That pattern is as unique as a fingerprint and far more difficult to copy. The technology, developed by Fujitsu, is already in use in cash machines in Japan and Brazil, and it could soon find its way into shops in the not too distant future.
Brings us to the fifth war, the war in the heavens. This next war is different from all the others because it is a supernatural war, a war that occurs in the heavens in the middle of the tribulation. It's most likely prompted by an attempt of Satan to take the throne of God one last time. We're told that Satan and his angels will be opposed in this war by Michael and his angels. Michael is an archangel who is pictured in the Hebrew Scriptures as the commander-in-chief of God's armies and as the special protector of Israel. Michael and his angels will prevail in this war, and Satan will be cast down to earth, and his access to heaven will be cut off, and in his rage, Satan decides to destroy the Jewish people. And this decision leads to the next war. The next war is the war against the Jews and the saints, launched by Antichrist at the motivation of Satan. The Antichrist launches this war in the second half of the tribulation for the purpose of killing every Jew on planet Earth and their Christian defenders. Folks, Satan hates the Jewish people. He hates them with a passion. He hates them because they are the chosen people of God. He hates them because through them God gave the world the Scriptures. He hates them because through them God gave the world the Messiah, and he hates them because God has promised over and over and over in his word that one day he is going to bring a great remnant of the Jews to salvation in Yeshua, the Messiah.
Government forces and the opposition are going at each other in several deadly hotspots around the globe tonight. Government forces are advancing in Syria, a public showdown in Venezuela, new gun battles in Thailand, but we begin in Ukraine.
The crisis in Ukraine is turning deadlier by the minute. Thailand and Venezuela also brought to the brink by major demonstrations and protests. Is this the kind of event that could lead to something far worse?
Yes, I think what it boils down to is that you have very large populations that haven't participated in the economic recovery.
What Russia is doing now in Ukraine violates the principles of the United Nations Charter. It threatens peace and security in Europe. Russia must stop its military activities and its threats.
A two-state solution to the Middle East peace process may have grown dimmer today. Correspondent Doug McKelway on the unfortunate timing of a visit by one of America's strongest allies.
A vigorous handshake, warm greetings, and an expression of hope for Mideast peace seem designed to tamp down reports of a prickly relationship between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
It's my belief that ultimately it is still possible to create two states, a Jewish state of Israel and a state of Palestine in which people are living side by side and peace and security.
The president said that a Mideast peace deal may hinge on a pullback of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Underscore the difficulty of Secretary of State John Kerry's framework, a 9-month negotiation launched last July, which now threatens to extend beyond a late April deadline.
There have been some amazing, significant prophetic things that have happened.
Yes, these tetrads, or these 4 moons, total eclipses of them, happen rarely, but last century they happened twice. 1967 and 1968, when Jerusalem was recaptured on Passover and Tabernacles, and then again right after Israel became a nation in 1948. It happened in 1949 and 1950. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is tied to Israel. And so I looked in the 1800s, there weren't any. 1700s, there weren't any. 1600s, there weren't any. In the 1500s, there were like 4 or 5 times, but none of them fell on the feast days. And then in the 1492 is when all the Jews were kicked out of Spain. And in 1493 and 1494, the same thing. And so I thought, wow, 2014 and 2015 looks like it's to be pretty significant.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas. Our goal remains, as it always has been, for the Israelis and Palestinians to reach a final status agreement. Not an interim agreement, a final status agreement. Both parties remain committed to fulfilling their obligations to stay at the table and negotiate hard during the 9-month period that we set for that. Great hospitality and for their joint commitment.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened.